I just don't have the mindset for it. But that one has stuck with me ever since, simply because he had been living at that house for a year. We have really screwed up here. Like, this is our fault.
Yeah.
And this should have never happened past the first offense.
Welcome back to Internal Affairs, a police podcast. I got here with another special guest, Erik Lavigne. Brother, thanks for stopping by, man. I know you're a busy dude, man. You're Code 6?
Yeah, yes, I am a very busy man, but today is all yours, baby.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. So, I got to tell you before we get started, and we're going to get to know you a little bit better, is not only are you doing God's work actively, but you know what you're doing is just, it's so appreciated. Take it from a little older man like me who's been around for 24 years. I always thought to myself, by providing this platform of a subject, right, of a topic that you and I can agree, it's a bit taboo. Not many people like to talk about IA, but you know what? This is my way of giving back to the next generation. And so right off the bat, I thank you for doing what you're doing with your podcast, and continue to do the great work you're doing, bro.
I appreciate it, man. Yeah, I try to surround myself with like-minded people. You know what I mean? So when I saw what you were doing, I saw you were coming from the education basis, and that is exactly what I came from for ours. It was my master's thesis. That's what I was like. That was my project, and I was trying to figure out a way to reach people without coming across like propaganda, as I like to call it.
Oh, I like that.
So I was trying to find a way that I could break down, the barriers that we face with the community, and I think education, humanizing, perspective, and humor are the best ways to go. So I didn't want to talk at people. I didn't want to come across like I was right. So I just went with the facts, the information, which fits perfectly with internal affairs, because I think that's what IA does to lead their investigations.
No, absolutely. And in addition to all that, I will always say this, is that there will never be enough platforms, police that is, for us to get our message for awareness and education. So again, thank you for that. So let's go with what you just said. So here you are, you see this guy, Marlon Marachi. Who the hell is this dude with an Internal Affairs Police podcast? What was your first impression, just out of curiosity, when you saw an IA podcast? Because you and I can agree, we're evil, right? I mean, that's what we were taught.
So when I saw IA podcast, I was like, all right, is it a gimmicky name? Like, like mine? Is it something that is just supposed to let you know, one, this is law enforcement, but we cover an array of things? Or is my man like from internal affairs, and now he's trying to talk about internal affairs stuff? So I immediately gave you a follow, and I was like, let me keep seeing him pop up on my feed, and I'll check it out. And that's how I do with everybody.
Yeah.
If I think you're in it just because you're trying to get clicks and stuff like that, like, I know that's part of the game to get your information out there. But when your roots are based in education, I'm all in. And I will help you out in any way I can, because I think that's why we all got into law enforcement, is to help people. And I know full well, as soon as I'm out of law enforcement, that's not going to stop me from wanting to help people. And that's the servant's heart in all of this. So when I saw internal affairs and then I started hearing your stuff, I was like, okay, he's okay. He's an internal affairs like expert, like, and I've never worked internal affairs.
Yeah.
So then I became intrigued myself. So I caught myself watching your stuff all the time. I was like, okay, I see. I still don't like IA, but you got it going.
So you know what? Let's go with that. So, Erik, if you're in a room full of sergeants that are getting ready to start their internal affairs assignment, what's the one thing you would want them to know about their job?
I guess the one thing I would want them to know is that you already are in a career that has flipped on its head. Police used to be revered and loved, and I don't think that's the case anymore. So you are going to go into a job that you're a cop. So people already don't like you, at least in the media. And then now you're going to be in a job where other cops don't like you because you're a Blue Falcon. You are out to get them. And then on top of that, the public isn't going to trust your findings.
Yeah, no, totally. You said what I teach Savage Training Group. I actually teach a California Post Certified course of internal affairs. And sometimes along the lecture, I talk about the Blue Falcon. Here it comes. Yeah, here it comes.
Right?
And
Yeah.
I always say there's always one, minimum one in every department in the United States. There could be more, but we'll get into that. I appreciate that. Let me ask you this. So you came on I know, let's see, you got 18 years total. When you first got involved in law enforcement, when you decided law enforcement, you went to the academy, and our next segment will be a trip down memory lane. What did your FTOs, or what did they what did they tell you about IA? What was your impression about IA? Or did you even know IA?
What I was told about IA was, if you were to go, like if you get called into IA, they said the first thing is don't lie. Like no matter what, like do not lie. There wasn't really a negative or positive connotation ever pushed about IA when I first started. It was just one of those taboo things that everybody knew but didn't really talk about.
Yeah.
Because unless you get pulled into IA, when do you ever really talk to IA as a rookie? You don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for me, I was that was the number one piece of advice. You go there, tell them the truth. Don't lie, because they will find it. And I'm like, okay, fair enough. I mean, you should know that as a cop anyway, but when you're a rookie, like, shit happens.
Yeah. You're a nervous friggin' wreck, man.
Right.
And would it be fair to say that in the academy, we don't get exposed to what the functions of internal affairs is?
No, not at all. And that is one of the problems. And one of the things that causes the taboo is it's the unknown. It is, you don't know the process. All you're told is when you get in an incident, if it's an active incident, shut your mouth, wait for your POA rep or your FOP or whatever your union is, and you don't talk until they tell you should talk. And I'm like, okay, well, what about IA? And now it's the unknown. You know you're going to have to go talk to IA, but you don't know the process. You don't know what necessarily what your rights are, when you should talk, when you shouldn't talk. And it becomes this tug of war match between your police union and the IA.
Yeah.
And nobody tells you about that shit until you're about to go through it.
Yeah, man. That trips me out, because to this very day, in my beloved LAPD, I don't think that there is, we call it learning domains, LDs. There's not a block, and whoever's watching, listening can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there's like a really good block of someone walking in there and saying, hey, man, this is what it's all about. And, here's some do's and don'ts, pros and cons. And we don't do that. And the shittiest part about it is that you can go through your career without even having an IA, or you can do like 10 years of great police work. But even if you did the right thing, somewhere down the line, especially when it comes to, a critical incident or whatever, they're going to scrutinize you and say, oh, you got an IA now. And now all of a sudden the world stops, right? I mean, would that be fair to say?
Yeah. Now, from your perspective, somebody that's been in IA and is what I would consider a national known expert in it, what would your recommendation be to an FTO when discussing IA?
There should be, when discussing IA, for sure, definitely know your definition of misconduct. I think that we don't have, when I teach, and again, the majority of the students are sergeants that are getting to begin their IA tour, some seasons, some lieutenants, and maybe some command staff. But for the most part, the audience is not really targeted to police officers. But the first thing I would say, even in the academy, is like, hey, man, you got to even know what alleged misconduct is. What's your definition of misconduct? That way you know that when you're doing the job, it's four prongs, the way I teach it, right? Okay, neglect of duty. Okay, got that. Failure to do this, failure to do that. Okay, got it. Violation of department policy and procedure. Okay, got that. A criminal offense. Wow, that's kind of easy. No big deal. Got it. And then the last one that everybody hangs their hat on, that's kind of like, I don't know what this one is, that unbecoming conduct, CUBO, conduct unbecoming an officer. But that's like a big umbrella, because what it basically says is that anything that you do that reflects super 100% negative on the eyes of the beholder, whether it's the community, the officer, the department, it doesn't look too good. That's going to be working cutting paper and doing an IA. So that would be a recommendation. I appreciate that. And here's the deal. You and I both can agree that, hey, man, when you're in the academy, bro, you're just trying to graduate. You just
there's so much going on.
I just want to get to graduation day, right?
Yeah. And I try to tell people, they're like, well, you guys should be hiring socially competent people. Like, that's the new, like, I wouldn't say it's the new thing, but I think that's what gets officers in the trouble the most, is they don't know how to talk to people. But even if you're a person who's great at talking to people, when you're going through the academy and you go through your FTO phases, you can't think like you would normally in any regular situation. So your ability to talk to people suffers, because you are now, am I violating their rights? Am I following general orders? Am I, what criminal offenses do I have? Do I have a criminal offense? Am I allowed to stop and detain this guy? Should I be talking to him? Do I got to read him his Miranda rights? Like, you got all of this stuff going through your head. Meanwhile, you're like, did I lock my car door? Is all my safety and security stuff okay on the scene? Like, you got all these new things. And that's why they say you're a rookie until about that 5-year mark out in the streets.
Oh, no, totally.
So now you're doing all that and trying to learn the process for your own general orders and policies and procedures and stuff like that. When you have those the catch-all, I think that's I think knowing your policies, procedures, general orders, SOPs, stuff like that, and then knowing your catch-alls, the ones that cops like me look at and be like, oh, that's how they screw you. If they're looking to get you, this is going to be the catch-all, how they're going to get you. So you've got to know those two, because I think, like you were kind of alluding to, like the criminal offense one, that's easy. Like, don't break the law while you're being a cop. Like, that makes sense. And then, it's very hard, because where I'm at, there's 1 million GOs, man. You got like 400 pages of general orders.
Oh, no, totally. Yeah, the manual, like, I'm supposed to know all this. I think there was a guest that once said, hey, man, while you're out in patrol, and doing God's work, pushing the sled is the way we refer it to. You're going to violate here and there, man. You know,
just own it. That's I think that's the most important part.
Things,
own your mistake.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, from the lens of an IA, and this is probably where we get a bad rap, is that we make something that's so minor to be such a big deal, and that's not the way it should be. But that's a whole different conversation about levels of review, chain of command, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, so I know this is your podcast, but
please,
the podcaster in me is taking over here. As an IA person who's done it for so long, do you start to lose the scope of who you were as a patrolman? Like, think about when you were that patrol officer. When we start to get in our fishbowl, we start seeing everything else in that lens of the fishbowl we're in. So if I'm IA, am I no longer remembering my brothers and sisters on the street and what we went through and how the job goes? And now I'm just looking through the lens of like, okay, black and white. Did he do this? Did he do that? And you start to become a little callous towards the career. Yeah.
You know what, Erik, the way I'll respond to that is a couple of ways. One is I'm a big critic of self-serving chain of command managers, administrators. When you start making it about yourself, you lose your integrity, man. You lose it all. And so don't look at it from that lens. Two, I can tell you from my experience is that anything that is on-duty related, right, like you said, in a fishbowl, pushing the sled, any operational functions, if you will, the department, in my experience, are very, very lenient. It's the off-duty behavior where the scope, it just, is it macro? Yeah. Macro is worse than micro. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah, it gets very macro. And so now we're like, okay, dude, you were at the bar in your skivvies with your duty belt, on top of the bar, badge hanging, and just.
I feel like you're drawing from a personal experience that you've seen.
That's like an ultimate cubo right there. What? Yeah. You were on top of the bar, swinging your shirt around, and you got the badge saying, yeah, I'm a cop. And I don't think that looks so well. And nowadays you got everybody with their cell phone. So yeah, you're probably gonna be a TikTok, overnight success, if you will.
Yeah.
But you might end up getting fired. So I think what happens is that there's a big difference between a classification of exoneration, sustained, and I guess what the majority of people call it is not sustained. We call those unfounded. So in other words, sustained means it actually occurred. There's not really much room for me when I frame an allegation that it didn't occur. Didn't occur means unfounded, which means not sustained. And then exoneration means like, hey, you know what? It did happen, right? It occurred, but you followed all the department policy and procedures. We're going to exonerate you from this particular incident. So that's the way I had looked at it always. I never try to make it about myself. I had a really good mentor. My commander told me as a young sergeant when I made it back in 2007. I met him in 2008. And he said, Marlon, whatever you do on this job, don't ever make it about yourself. Get politics and egos out the way. And it's never about you. And that has always stuck with me. But then again, you're talking about me out of thousands of sergeants in a department that's just, at one point, it was like 10,000 plus. And so one of many reasons why I decided to even have this particular type of podcast is because we have a lot of awareness to give. I mean, come on, 18,000 agencies throughout the United States. We're over 800, north of 800,000 police officers. We got a lot of work to do because you and I both know that the minute something goes viral, like, the Massey OIS that just happened or any other incident, right? You said it earlier. We've been painted with such a negative, lens ever since the defunding movement, where we have a lot of work to do to give a positive image. So one of many reasons to decide to do all this. So yeah, I appreciate the question, man. There's a lot of. Go ahead.
Where it's coming from is from my lens as a sergeant in the streets.
Mm-hmm.
The concern that I have when I see IA. Any IA, not just my own, but the concern I have is just like in any unit, specialized unit that you get, if you're property crimes, something I specialized in. My goal is to just hammer the shit out of property crimes people. I'm not looking for any other type of fish other than that. And then when you start to have that lens all the time, and this is full discretion, I caught myself like, oh, this guy, he stole, and I made this up, but he stole a Coke from the store. Okay, now that makes me look good. I got a property crimes offense. Boom, you're mine. You're going to jail.
Right.
Does that happen? That's my concern with IA around the nation is like, are you being groomed by your leadership that every time you do get an officer, that's a good thing. You did a good job. Great.
Yeah.
Oh, shit. The leadership's looking at me now because I did something they wanted. And now you're reinforcing what may be negative down the road because you're trying to find that officer that just grabbed a can of Coke, so to speak. And it's really not a big deal, but you just made it a big deal.
No, totally, 100%. And sometimes it gets personal.
Yeah. I think that's the transition. You go from...
some lieutenant, some captain's going to say, oh my God, I would never do something like that. So yeah, just hammer this guy.
Right. Yeah. And so now you're being reinforced by your leadership. And I think in a subconscious way, I don't think any sergeant or officer is like trying to feed the beast, feed the machine. Something happens over a course of time where, like me in property crimes, like I'm just fixed in and I'm like, I got to get this, I got to get that.
Yeah.
And it took me a second to step back and look at the bigger picture and go, oh, what am I doing? Like, this really isn't a big, I have discretion here. Let's use it. Let's do this. Now I understand IA is a little different. It's not necessarily a discretion thing. It's here's the facts. Here's my guidelines.
Yeah. And your officers are going to appreciate you for, if you do take a public complaint, which is what happens more often than, inside, right? Employee. They're going to appreciate you turning every single stone. I mean, you're an investigator. You know this. I always say it. No stone goes unturned. Do what's best. And we have these discussions about, hey, is this kind of job? Maybe, and I'll ask you this. What do you think the job in IA investigator is? It to protect cops or what do you think?
I look at it more agnostic. I think that's the one. It's like being a judge in a way.
Uh-huh.
Like my job isn't to decide, this, that, the other. It's to interpret what I have in front of me.
Yeah.
Here's what I have.
Yeah.
Okay. Based on what I have in front of me, trying to stay as black and white as we can, not emotionally invested. Let the facts lead you where they go.
Yeah.
And as an investigator, I don't think it matters that my clientele is now police. I think it matters more of what the facts lead to. I'm
Yeah.
not trying to stretch anything out one way or the other. Does
Yeah.
that make
No.
sense?
Oh, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Where, and again, when we asked this to the class in my Savage Training Group course, some people raise their hand and said, oh, yeah. And some people say no. And so there's never really a right answer, because if you say, well, yes, it's to protect cops, then, okay, congratulations, Erik. Here's your next case of this, essay or this, pornography case we got going on with this molester, of this officer.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, well, okay, well, I thought your job was to protect. You see what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
so, and so we're careful with, how, what you would define to be protection. I think it is to protect cops, but more than anything, it's to protect the system, the process. You know how you protect cops?
Right.
When you know your rights. That's how you protect them. When you turn every single stone, when you are there for them in their darkest moments. Because you and I can agree that when you get called or you get that email or whatever saying that you are being investigated by the IA, the world stops, man. I don't care how minor it is. It's just not a good feeling. And I suppose that's one of many reasons why I decided to do this, is because, man, let's have these conversations where we can tell the audience and say, hey, man, it's not really a big deal. We're not as evil as people think we are. But you and I can agree that, yeah, no bad actors, no bad apples on the department. And if you have the evidence to prove, right, preponderance, 51% more likely than not. If you're lying, let's crank that up and have a lot of evidence to prove that you're a liar. Me personally, way more than 51%. And to get you out of here. So
this is why I preach to officers. Have your body cam charged, have your body cam ready, and use it often.
Yeah.
Turn that thing on before you even think you need to. Get it on, and you're fine. If you're the type of officer that's out there doing what you believe to be the right thing, you'll be fine. Yeah. Even if you do the wrong thing, but you did it, with a good heart in mind, you're fine.
Yes.
You may get your hand slapped because you violated a policy or general order.
Yep.
But guess what? All good cops have that happen.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. Mistake of heart, mistake of mind, man. We can agree to that.
Yep.
Hey, brother, a trip down memory lane. Let's see here. So you're a 18-year veteran. Congratulations. You're coming up on 20. I know that, you can see the light at the end of the tunnel with retirement. 2006, Air Force, right?
Correct.
Military.
Yep.
Yeah. Did you have
That's how I started.
How many years did you do in the Air Force, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm still in. So I did 4 years active.
Okay.
I did 2006 to 2010.
Okay.
But then I jumped into the IMA reserves, which is a little different than what most people know. But I'm basically still attached to an active duty unit as a reservist.
Are you like what are you, like an E9 hour? What I mean, where are you?
I wish. Nope, just E6, man.
Just an E6. I got to tell you, I was in the Navy, living on a boat, a very old tin can, if you will. And we used to always make fun of the Air Force guys. We're thinking to ourselves, man, as an E3, which is like not even 2 or 3 years, E2. I even go there, E2, which is like 2 years out of the academy, or a boot camp, I should say. Man, you guys got a stateroom with like Starbucks. You're living the good life, and it takes like a lot of rank. In the Navy, I can't speak for the Marines or the Army, but in the Navy, man, you got to be like a first-class petty officer, like an E6, to get your own berthing, to get your own Starbucks, if you will.
Right. Hey, man, all I can say is you got to do a little better on your ASVAB. You'd be all right.
Or just make better decisions, right?
Come on over to the Air Force, man. You ain't got to swim. You get to watch cool planes, and you're behind enemy lines. I'm sorry, you're not behind enemy lines.
Yeah.
You don't have to go into enemy lines.
There you go. That's right. 2009, Good old Michigan. Go Wolverines, right? Big Wolverine fan?
Hell yeah, go
Yeah.
blue
Go
all
blue
day long.
all day long. Go Red
Yep.
Wings.
Go Red Wings, absolutely. Yeah, hockey is like my number
That's your
one
thing.
favorite sport
Yeah.
to watch, and baseball.
Yeah.
Big into those two things. But I'm a Detroit guy all the way. If you
Yeah.
can kind of see in the
Yeah.
background there, my little blurry Detroit hat,
Yeah.
my Detroit hat that I'm wearing. Yeah,
Yes.
all day
Right.
long.
Good. And then we moved to God's country, and you went to an academy in 2012.
Yep, when it came down to Texas, became a big city cop in the DFW area. I'll leave it at like that. You
Yeah,
guys can
let's leave it
figure
at
out
that.
where I work. I just don't associate where I work when I do these things because you got to follow general orders, and you want IA to come after you
Yeah,
for,
that's right.
for making the department
There you
look
go.
bad.
Exactly.
So,
Let me ask you this. What's the one job that you would like to have?
so real-time crime centers are a new thing.
Mm-hmm.
And intelligence-based policing. I know that's not necessarily a new term, but the way intelligence-based policing is done is new.
Okay.
And you've got license plate readers, you've got facial recognition stuff, you got drones now, you got all of these tools available so officers don't have to be physically right on top of your bad guys. And I think that is the future of policing. So I am trying to get myself, whether it's in homeland security units, intelligence units, where you're the observe and report and find your biggest baddest bad guys, in the real time crime center itself, where you're helping the officers in the field by
Mm-hmm.
getting them up to date real information. It's not the same as dispatch for those wondering.
Mm-hmm.
It's very different, and learning how to catch, your violent offenders, safer for the community, safer for the officers, and safer for the bad guys. I know that sounds weird,
Yeah.
but if we can get that trifecta, we're winning, and that's where I see myself in the future.
Intelligence policing. I like that. Sounds sexy.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm a huge nerd too, so I like
Yeah,
the
I can
tech
imagine.
side of
You're the
stuff.
techie. You're a techie dude.
I am a techie dude,
Yeah, I saw
for
that.
sure.
Yeah, good for you. Man. Well, good. Hey, so here we are, man. This segment for an IA story. Got to have one. I know you got a good one, and I'll leave the floor up to you, man. Tell me about this IA story where we can get some lessons learned.
Okay, so it's not. I won't call it a sexy IA story. It is one of the times where I want to. I want to give a story about IA that reinforces that IA can really help you.
Okay.
And so for us, where I'm at now, IA doesn't tell you they're investigating you. They don't tell you. They investigate you, and then if nothing's founded, if you never hear anything, you don't even know.
That sounds stealth. That's kind of scary.
Yeah. And so now this is where having, friends and stuff, I got a phone call one day and they're like, this isn't against policy. This isn't with policy, but I just want to let you know, we did your investigation and we found that everything was good. And he's like, the reason I'm calling you is because your body cam is what saved and made this investigation very easy. He goes, but people don't typically turn their body cams on in these parts. And I'll explain the backstory. So here's the backstory.
Mm-hmm.
I was working a part-time gig. So I don't know. Every department calls it something a little different, moonlighting, whatever you will.
Mm-hmm.
In my city, any business that, passes their background check and doesn't have a violent crime issue, such as, in this case, valets. I was working for a valet company
Okay.
to block traffic, move traffic, stuff like that. So, I was a human traffic control device is really what I was doing.
Okay.
And I see a vehicle park in a commercial loading and unloading. And I normally like, all right, cool. As long as you're there quick, in and out, like big picture stuff. Like I'm not trying to make waves for anybody.
Right.
If you're not affecting traffic, it ain't a big deal. Do your thing. Well, a car parks and he gets out of the vehicle. And I'm like, come on, man. So I have to run over there. Like, hey, you got to move your car. You can't do that. He's like, I just got to go do this. I got to go do that. And I'm like, that you can't do that. I was like, you see that sign right there? It's commercial loading, unloading zone. I need you got to move, man. And he gets all sorts of pissed. And I think what he was doing was he's like a Uber Eats, but he was also like dropping off a package or something. They're like, he's out there making money.
Right.
Cool. No big deal. But as I was going over, I knew I was about to have an encounter with a citizen. So I turned on my body camera because I always like having that unbiased third-party witness with me, which is the body cam.
Yep.
So I go over there and tell the guy, and I could tell he's mad, but he listens. He goes and does what he does. And I thought that was the end of it, but I got a bad vibe about it. So I went over, my body cam's still going, and I went over to the valet workers. I
Mhm.
was like, man, did you guys hear that guy over there? And they're like, yeah, he's an idiot. Why would he park there? Clearly you're not supposed to, and he's obstructing. Like, I didn't prompt them to say any of that stuff. They
Right,
just saw
right,
what it
right.
was.
Right.
And I left my body camera rolling, and I was like, all right, cool. So now everybody knows it wasn't just me that saw it. Like,
Yeah.
these people on the sidewalk saw it. And um, then I ended, it's end investigation, turned my body camera off. And here we are, like a month later. I'm lucky I even remembered that situation, but I got a call and they're like, hey, just want to let you know we cleared up your investigation that somebody had complained, this, that, and the other. We wanted to let you know that you turning your body cam on was what made this investigation go faster, smoother, and in your favor. And he's like, we want to let you know that because we want to encourage you to always do that because this is typically the results when that happens.
Right, right, right.
So he was that's what I really appreciate that the IA guy did was that he reinforced a positive behavior from an officer. And that doesn't happen a lot. Me as a detective, I would do that all the time when I would see an
Yeah.
amazing report. I never got this when I was in patrol, but I wish I had.
Right.
And I would get these officers that they went and they went above and beyond on the standards of patrol,
Mhm.
and they made the investigation so much easier on me that I needed to let them know, hey,
Yeah.
because you did this, that, and the other, you made the investigation easy on me. Kudos to you. Please keep doing that. And I would CC their sergeant. So now they see they're getting props. And if they did an outstanding job, but basically
Right.
solving the case, then I would write a commendation for them, which doesn't mean a whole lot coming from a detective. But damn, it's nice,
Oh no,
when you're an
totally.
officer.
Validation
So
goes a long way, man. I'm sure
yeah.
and affirmation both,
Yeah,
and
I'm
it's
not a everybody deserves a trophy guy by any
yeah.
means,
No, no,
but
totally.
when like you would know from IA when you
Yeah.
you investigate officers over and over and over and you see that there's a habit on part times that they're not
Yep.
turning their body cameras on. They're
Yep.
following policy because they have it with them, but
Yep.
they're not there's always the well, it was a fluid dynamic situation. I didn't think to turn my camera on. Okay, that makes sense. I get it. And in my instance, I some people may not have thought to turn their body cam on,
Yeah. Now,
but
let me if
I
I may
did.
ask some follow-up questions with that. Your thoughts of and maybe you can I don't know, speak a little bit about culture. It, I'm getting do I get the impression not maybe God's country, but just in general, uh, is there officers that don't really turn on their body worn video? Because I got my thoughts about that.
No. Okay, so let me preface why that is. When you're on duty, when
Uh
you're
huh.
in your patrol car and you got all your normal you got a rhythm, you got a groove, you
Yeah.
got,
Yeah. Yeah.
this is my flow when I go to
Yes.
work, I
Yes.
check out my gear, I check out my patrol car, I make
Yes.
sure everything's good, tires are, you got a flow.
Yes.
Okay, I just got dispatched to a call. Boom, okay, I'm almost on scene. Punch on scene, doot doot, turn my
Boom.
camera, like that is the flow.
Yeah.
But when you work a part-time, you're in a different mindset. You're
Yeah.
bullshitting with the people that you're working with, and you're doing this, that, and the other. And you don't typically have to deal with anything on a good part-time anyway. You
Yeah.
shouldn't have to do any work. That's
Exactly.
the
Yeah. Yeah. And
that's
you're
the
off duty.
the bread
Absolutely.
basket.
Totally. Totally get that.
Yeah. So you get out of that flow and something
Ah,
happens, you're like, ah, crap. Now you go deal
yeah.
with it. And you're
Yeah.
like, ah, shit, I didn't turn my camera on. Well, nothing happened with it anyway, so it's not a big deal. It wasn't an actual call. And that's the
Right.
beauty of having officers in the field on allowing them to work these off-duty gigs is they
Yeah.
save patrol officers a lot of calls because they squash things before they get big.
Yeah. Totally.
Me going over and addressing that guy's car was a tax-free service of the city,
Yep.
and no accidents occurred, and they didn't have to call the police because I already handled it. So
Yeah.
that's where that benefit comes in. So no, it's not that they have a habit of not turning their cameras on. It's when we get outside of our comfort zone and
Yeah.
that flow, things start to kind of fall apart.
That makes so much sense. And I'm only speaking because let's see, here in the state of California, 2015 was the birth of body worn video. There was an agency up in Northern California who did the pilot program. So we're about, I guess we're almost close to 10 years in. And I know when we implemented in 2016, January of 2016, that is, our body worn video policy, because we're all getting them, is they give you like a 90-day grace period. Like, in other words, man, you got like 90 days to like get used to turn it on. Here's the policy and the criteria where you have to turn it on and when you don't have to turn it on. And so,
Right.
you know, and here we are, you know, almost 10 years later. And sometimes, you know, I agree. I think if you're off duty and you're, you know, you're not in your groove, in your swag,
Right.
if you will, yeah, you're probably, you know,
Yep.
but that's a whole different conversation. There's been, you know, I've worked on a case where they wanted to go in pursuit and they admitted that they didn't have enough to say the P word, and they actually turned off their body worn video when they initiated the traffic stop. Yeah, it's a mess. That's a whole different ballgame. Young cops, you know, I don't know. Hey, let's just go chase them, but let's just not turn on our body worn video. Whatever. I got it.
Yeah.
Roger that. But those are the minor things compared to what happened later. But that's a whole different story. We'll talk about that later.
Gotcha.
Let me. The other question I had about the story is that, having to reflect on it now as you're telling me the story, would prefer that they actually told you, they meaning IA, that you were being investigated for alleged misconduct?
No, I like the way they did this one. I like that they waited, because now that's not sitting on my mind. It doesn't matter if you know you followed everything to the letter. Knowing you're being investigated is nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
Because now you're thinking like, did I? And for me, it's always the little things that I tell other officers, don't sweat. It's not that big deal.
Yeah.
But if I was sweat, because I curse all the time. Oh, that's against the general orders. I shouldn't be cursing. And then I'm like, did I swear at the guy? Did I swear at myself? Did I, you know, like, what did I do that was inappropriate, you know? And so, no, I am glad they waited, because then there was zero stress. And then the fact that they followed it up with a positive finish to it, like, hey, because you did this, that, and the other, like,
great outcome,
keep doing that.
positive outcome.
Yeah. And so I was like, oh,
I can only imagine, especially with your personality. Here I am asking you, you know, would you like to have known? And you're like, no, I'm glad this handled. And then here you are on the field, and you take a public complaint, and you're like telling your officer, hey man, you know, they made this complaint, and you know, I gotta do an IA, and it, like you said, it's nerve-wracking. You know, I can only imagine you're going to be just the same way. And as minor as it is, you're like, oh shit, I cannot believe this is happening to me. You know, you go home and, oh yeah, it's a mess. It's a mess.
Yeah.
I've been a recipient of a couple of IAs, and I totally, even though I've prosecuted cops for serious misconduct, I have defended cops more. I did 2 tours defending cops, and I've also been the subject with a couple IAs. And I got to tell you, 100% agree with you. It's nerve-wracking.
So, okay, let me flip the script on you, because here is where I get frustrated. And I think this is a common practice across the nation. I don't think it's necessarily a red state, a blue state, you know, I don't get into politics by any means, but what irritates me is, in my case, specifically the one I just told you about, there was no charges put on this man for a false police report, because the allegations he made were wild. And I'm like, okay, like, did we charge this person? And we didn't.
No.
So is that a common thing for IA to see some just wildly outlandish accusations? For me, like, I'm going to be like, all right, cool, we'll do the IA investigation, but you have to come in and give me a sworn written statement, and then we're good. We'll go with it. But because I want to get your ass if you're lying.
Yeah. So back in the late 90s, early 2000s, I know of a motor officer who did a traffic stop, had a recorder, right? Audio recorder, to be exact. And took I want to say both occupants, the violator, the driver and the passenger, and decided and proceeded to give him a moving violation. And I want to say at some point, and don't quote me so much on the facts, but I think at some point they got out of the car. Anyhow, they meaning I shouldn't say the actual driver violator received a citation, a moving citation. Anyhow, a IA complaint comes out of that. he gets IA'd with outrageous allegations of, like, took me out of the car, he yelled at me, threw me up against the fence, all kinds of stuff you can imagine, just the way you're describing it, right?
Yeah.
And so he decided to go to small civil claims for malicious prosecution. I think it's what it's called. No attorneys. It's just you. You're the plaintiff, and you basically tell the judge, hey, you know what? Oh, and by the way, part of the criteria is that he got IA'd, he got served, right? It's what we call a skelly. You guys call it a Garrity. He gets served, and it comes back unfounded. I believe exonerated. Either or. It never happened. So he's completely exonerated from the whole thing. So he grabs his IA, has it with him, and goes to court with his audio recording and tells the judge, like, hey, all this stuff that defendants is here about me, that's just a whole bunch of made-up stuff. It's just completely outrageous. And she's like, oh, really? And he goes, yeah, I even have an audio recording. Oh, you do, is what the judge says. Can I hear it? 100%, here it is. And so
Cue it up.
Cue it up. Push play. And I want to say that the maximum amount of a claim was $700. I think it was $7,500, or was it $750? I think it was $750. Maybe I'm exaggerating. I got to call him and find out what the amount was. But there was a maximum amount of a claim, and he won. The award goes to the plaintiff. Yeah. Malprosecution in the state of California. Now, to your point, there used to be a time in the early 90s where in the actual face sheet of the IA, there is a disclaimer saying that something along the lines like, if you make any false accusations, there is the possibility of you being file suit civilly in the city attorney's office, blah, blah, blah. And it's not a common practice, and I think it's because, again, it's probably just time-consuming and a lot of work in LAPD alone from 2011 to 2015, because I was there, you're talking in an excess of 3,000 public complaints, 4,000, north of 4,000 a year. And 96.4% of those came back unfounded. They were classified and adjudicated
I'm
as
okay
unfounded.
with unfounded. What I'm not okay with is egregious lying. And
right,
especially in the age of body cams, you're like, none of this occurred.
And you bring up a good point, because you and I can, maybe that's a good project we can do where we call it demonstrably false here as an adjudication, where we watch body-worn video and we say, you know what, Mr. Smith, you said that these officers threw you up against the wall when, on this traffic stop right here. Well, you can come in the room right here. We can watch body-worn video. That's not exactly how it actually went down. And next, Mr. Smith is, moonwalking, and he's gone. And so I totally agree. I think with the evidence of body-worn video, we can present a case where it's demonstrably false. Whatever is it that they were accusing the officers is just a flat-out outrageous lie. Look at all the time and effort and the emotional roller coaster, if you will, that this person put on the officers. And unfortunately, my thinking is I'm going to chalk that up to too much time and effort. And, I guess it's, they don't want to do that stuff, man.
Yeah. It's no different to me, like when somebody sues the police department and you find out that they settled versus fighting it, because full well, if they fight it, it's going to cost more money than if they just pay out. And that's why they settle sometimes. And I'm like, I'm a man of principle. I will I will die on the cross, so to speak, if I think that my movement is righteous, if that makes sense.
No,
but
totally.
If you're going to lie about me or now that I'm a sergeant, I call myself a baby sergeant. About to hit my 1 year mark as a street patrol sergeant, and
nice.
I will jump on that grenade for my guys if they were in the right.
Which you and I can agree, more often than not, they are in the right.
Yeah.
That's what I've learned about internal affairs. Whatever we get out of this conversation, just know that we're always doing the right thing. The heart is there, and the intentions are to protect and serve and all that good stuff that we preach. And that's where we're at. And, it just upsets me when, we have all these OISs, and you and I both know Joe Gamaldi is a perfect example. Joe is really huge on the war on cops, and I couldn't agree with him more. And I always say, you know what? No matter what, you got to call 911, and guess who's coming to help you, regardless of what you think. And that's just something that's just not noticed enough, if that makes sense.
Yeah. All the stuff that we've dealt with in the past, 10, 15 years as police officers, where have you seen officers strike?
Yeah.
When have you ever seen them refuse to go work? I think that goes into the integrity of what people do for this job. It doesn't
Totally.
matter how much you hate on them, they're still showing up to work
Yep.
and doing what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Maybe a lot of people calling in sick,
Yeah.
but not all of them.
Yeah,
They're going to make a
exactly.
point, but they're still going to show up
Yeah,
to work.
totally.
But yeah, I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
And
I think the culture also needs to change too. I think I think one of my guests said it best, a 30-plus-year veteran, LEPD lieutenant said it best. You know what? A lot of it has to do is how we treat each other. And I'm a true believer of that. We need to treat each other better.
Oh,
so
police will eat their own really quick.
Oh, yeah. We do it to ourselves all the time.
Yeah.
Hey, brother, let me ask you this. This is the one dark part of the episode. I got to ask, worst incident in your career?
Worst incident. Do you mean like a call I took, or do you mean like
whatever? Yes.
Okay.
People tend to draw to a radio call, service call, and where it's just really dark. And take me there, man, if you have one or whatever you got.
Okay. So I was on the property crimes unit, and let me give you a little background of what the property crimes unit's like where I'm at, because they're different all over the nation. So with mine, we had about a 6 to 8 person unit. I was the lead detective / corporal, and we were a field team. We weren't a office team. So basically what we did was we had a bunch of undercover cars. All these officers worked under me, and then I worked for the sergeant who did stay in the office. So I ran the team, so to speak. The sergeant just like, do your thing, just keep catching bad guys and don't make me look bad. So I was like, all right, cool, I got you. And we got a report of a Buddhist temple that had kept getting hit. Like people were breaking in. So we're like, man, that stinks. Let's look out for these guys, because they don't have a loud voice in the community. They're very isolated. It's very rare, especially in the South, to have a Buddhist temple. And this is a really nice one, like movie-esque, like when you think, but it's in the hood. So it's an easy target. Anyway, we found a car parked just down the street, and that doesn't happen where they're located at. People don't typically park on the street. So we had a UC car drive by, and they're like, it's occupied 2 times. There's a male in the side seat and a female driving, and they're just sitting there, and they're looking at the temple. And we're like, that's weird. Let's get a marked unit, and let's just make a stop and just see what's going on. Make an investigative stop. So we go over there, and none of their stories are making any sense, but it's not property crime related, if that makes sense. So we're trying to get their identification and run them, just make sure they ain't got any warrants. And we're just going to annotate, hey, this vehicle was over here. So later on, if they get found to be involved in any burglaries, now we got them identified. And we get the female driver real quick. She's a nobody on our radar. She doesn't have a criminal history. And the passenger's playing the name game. So here's where you'll respect as an IA person. Like, I don't have an offense. I'm making an investigative stop based on the facts I gave you. High crime area. This is what's on. I don't have a lot of time to hold on to this guy.
Right.
The window was closing. So I said, let him go.
Time is of the essence.
Yeah. I said, let him go. We couldn't figure out who he was. And we were getting under that cusp of unreasonable detention. So let him go. And used what information we had. We went back, we researched, because between me, another officer, and 2 other officers were like, something wasn't sitting right. I was assuming it was he either had a warrant or it was dope related.
Right.
And so we start to research this guy, and then come to find out he is a aggravated child predator. And then we start really doing our homework. Now, we got lucky because the girlfriend told us where she lived. So we had her updated address. And we get We get to looking at this guy's background. I mean, he is the darkest of darks when it comes to what his offense was. And he gave us a fake name. He had not updated his registration where
Mhm.
he was living. So he was on the run, basically,
Okay.
and figured out who he was. We went, and I like this is where I get into the nerd part and technology. We started running the fake name he gave us and who we believed him to be for
Mhm.
all of our body cam footage for the last year to see if we made contact with him. And we found that we had made contact with him under his fake name. So we were able to pull that footage. And
Okay.
now we've got a positive link. This is the same guy. This is the same name he gave us. Boom. Um, so we go over to the home. It's an apartment complex. 3 little kids answer the door. 5-year-old girl and 2 7-year-old twin boys. 5-year-old girl is what do they call it? Nonverbal,
Okay.
doesn't speak. And if anybody's worked in any crimes against children unit, you know that that's a big red flag. You
Mhm.
don't, they should be talking by that age.
Yeah.
And she was nonverbal. And then we find out more about the girlfriend. She was in a homeless place
Shelter.
facility
Mhm.
with her children, and that's where this dude found them. So what does that tell you as a cop?
Oh.
That he was grooming and rolling through the homeless camps to find a target, to
Oh.
find somebody that was susceptible. And we get him. He happens to be there. We get him cuffed, take him in just because of his violation.
Mhm.
And then we involve our crimes against children unit.
Mhm.
They come out, they do their interviews along with CPS, which is our Child Protective Services,
Uh-huh.
and come to find out he had sig 5 or did the with all those kids, had ruined them, and especially the 5-year-old girl multiple times.
Oh.
And yeah, it was a hard call for
Yeah,
me,
I can only
especially being
imagine.
the dad of 2 daughters.
Oh.
Um, I I I purposely avoided crimes against children my whole career.
Yeah.
I just don't have the mindset for it. But that one has stuck with me ever since, simply because he had been living at that house for a year.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
the
man.
knowing that he's had full access to this girl for a
Yeah.
year,
Totally.
the girlfriend, she's a little she wasn't all there upstairs necessarily.
Yeah.
And clueless,
Yeah.
clueless to everything that had happened. And people are like, "Oh, she knew." No, no, she really didn't. She just was. It's simple. It's the only way I could put it. And he knew that, and he took
Yeah.
advantage of it.
Yeah.
And he's just the worst of predators that you can think of.
Yeah,
So
yeah. No, that's the worst that God has to offer, man. People don't really understand how. I mean, this happened what? How many years ago?
this happened in 2019.
Yeah,
And it's one of the stories I tend to tell officers. I'm
yeah.
like, listen, this is where doing your job, when the little hairs on the back of your neck
Yes.
tell you to do your job, this is exactly what we ran into, because we could have easily went up there and goes, nope, they're not burglary people, because they weren't. That wasn't the
Correct.
vibe that we was getting
Yeah.
necessarily. You're playing the name game, cool. You probably have a warrant for something. I get it, but the more important part was you're not the guy that's breaking into this place, which is what we're
Correct.
concerned about.
Yeah.
So I could
Yeah.
have kicked him loose, but no,
Yeah.
all of us got a weird vibe, and we trusted that instinct and followed through. And
Yeah.
we got the most extreme reason for why you should listen to that little voice in the back of your head.
Oh, awesome. Hey, man, thanks for sharing that. I really appreciate it. And it goes to the all I can think about when you told me about that great investigative work is no stone goes unturned, man. And I'm sure that family appreciates you and your bosses and everybody. So again, thank you. Let's leave on a good one, man. Talk to me about a best achievement reward, something good, whether it's a service call or give me something good, bro.
Okay, I got a good one for you. So I got the Merit Award, which is our third highest award at my department where
That's
I'm
awesome.
at. For this one, I get a case, and it is a mentally disabled slash elderly man. He's about 76 years old, um, mentally deficient to the point, but he can live on his own.
Okay.
His older brother is 86 and is his caretaker, so he would give him like allowance, come over and check on him weekly.
Okay.
Well, I got I think it was a theft from person. That was what the report was
Hmm.
theft from person. So
Hmm.
I'm doing my due diligence as a detective. I'm calling and trying to follow up. Okay, hey, I got your report in front of me here. It looks like somebody stole some stuff from you. Um, and I hadn't watched the body cam footage yet of the investigation. I hadn't done any of that. It's just
Hmm.
making contact with the victim. Well, the brother, the caretaker, is the one that answered the phone. And he's like, yeah, you could say that. And he's like, yeah, he came inside my brother's house and
Hmm.
did this, did that. And I'm like, what? That's not theft from person. That is a home invasion.
Yeah.
Like, sir, before we go any farther, when's a good time to call you? And when's a good time that we can follow up with this? And he's like, I'll come up there if you need me to. I was like, you know what? That'll work. So we made an appointment. Meanwhile,
Hmm.
I realized I jumped the gun and I needed to investigate this call a little bit further. So I pull up all the body cam footage of the investigation, and the brother, the caretaker, was there, and our victim, the 76-year-old man, was there, and they had a packet on the suspect
Hmm.
of this guy. I'm like, that is unusual. How this guy's been a problem before. How do you have this thing? So now I really backtrack and find out there's a 5-year history between these people.
Oh, wow.
And what it was a homeless guy taking advantage. I shouldn't say homeless. It was a sort of semi-homeless
Okay.
taking advantage, extorting my mentally disabled person. And there had been 4 or 5 other reports over the course of 5 years that this had slipped through the cracks. Um, so they had basically given up. These two people, these victims, had given up on police, but the only reason they went through with it on this time was because he came into the home, which was a new thing. So what I found out through the course of my investigation was another detective had really screwed the pooch
Yeah.
and just took everything for face value. Um, and I had 2 or 3 prior robberies. This is really what they were. They were robberies, but they were called
Hmm.
theft from person. So here in Texas, those are 2 totally different offenses. One
Right.
is a misdemeanor, the other one is a third-degree felony. So, or higher, just depends. And
Yeah.
so I'm looking and I'm like, oh my God, we have really screwed up here. Like this is our fault.
Yeah.
And this should have never happened past the first offense.
Yeah.
So our to give you a little background, the suspect had went up to a Jack in the Box, saw our victim, basically probably followed him there, and strong armed him, took his money, and left him there. Happened again at another restaurant, take his money, strong arm him, and rough him up a little bit,
Yeah.
nothing crazy, but doesn't matter. And then there was a criminal trespass that was not a criminal trespass on this guy's house. It was a freaking robbery.
Yeah.
He and so there's here we got 4 cases that were misdiagnosed.
Wow.
Um and I'm sitting there, I'm like, this is unreal. We could have stopped this so many years ago. And here this guy's giving up on the system, giving up on us, and
Yes.
hasn't reported several other things. And then finally this one was so egregious, they're like, well, we gotta say something to the police. Maybe they'll help us this time. So now I have my meeting with him and I get the caretaker because I'm not really discussing with the victim himself other than the facts of the person because he's just not mentally there enough to do that.
Right.
And find out, they know who he is. They've got this packet on him. So I know my suspect. I've got everything lined up. So then I backtrack. I'm like, okay, on this case, was this your person? On this
Yeah.
case, was this your person? And so
Hmm.
now I've lined up 5 cases. Well, I reopened all of them cases and
Yeah.
aggregated everything and then took it to the judge and said, here's my guy. He has not only done this, that, and the other. We have failed as a police department,
Mm.
and this is what happened. And I said, but we're trying to fix it. We're trying to make up for it. Here's
Yeah.
what I got. And the judge's like, okay, $250,000 bond. I'm like, holy shit.
Wow.
$250,000 bond
It's
on
unheard of.
yeah, on basically a robbery, which is nuts. So I'm like, all right, cool. So then I went out to every patrol unit and specialized unit that worked after my shift because I was looking for this guy myself. I wanted to catch him myself. Um, I didn't get him, but I'm also not the type of guy that needs the kudos. It was a personal mission because
Yeah.
the victim, and if I'm gonna be honest, he reminded me of my grandpa, just the way he looked,
Yeah, no, totally.
and there was like this emotional attachment
Of
to it because I had
course.
just lost my grandpa not too long before
Yeah.
that. So, and we were super close. So
Yeah.
I signed from God, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah,
I
no,
just
you're
felt,
consumed. You're
yeah,
consumed
I felt
completely.
emotionally attached to
Of
this
course.
cause. So
Absolutely.
now I'm like, I don't care who gets him. I just want him to get caught.
Yeah.
So I went to roll calls. I was like, hey, and I told him exactly what I'm telling you. Here's the story. I made roll call last a little bit longer than normal because I wanted them as emotionally invested in this call as I was.
Mm-hmm.
And they were. So as soon as I got through with all the roll calls for the evenings and midnight shifts, he was caught within 24 hours because they were out
Awesome.
looking for him.
Boom.
And get him. Now, not only do we get him, he gets a 40-year sentence. This guy
Damn.
is in his 50s. He's not getting out.
Good for
He'll be
you,
dead
man.
before he gets out. And then I was able to go to the victims and tell them, hey, we got him and he's not getting out again. So I got to make contact with my victims twice, letting them know, hey, we caught him. He's off the streets. You're good. And
Yeah.
then I got to come back and say, hey, not only did we get him, he ain't coming back.
That's
So
awesome,
that
man.
was my feel good story.
Good for
And that
you,
was
man.
a huge team effort. And it was
Yes.
just, and that's what ended up getting me the merit award, which I'm proud of getting. I'm not a big
Yes.
awards guy. Again, I don't need a trophy,
Yeah.
but
Totally.
that one I was so emotionally invested, and I
No.
fully
Yeah.
admit, and I know you shouldn't do that, but I was emotionally invested, and it was such a satisfying win within. This was the other thing. I did all of that within 72 hours.
Ah, awesome, man.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Be very, very proud, brother. I don't even know what to add besides the fact that it's just sometimes police work is underappreciated. I guess that's the best way to put it. People just don't understand the things that we do, man. So I really thank you for that. Hey, listen, man, we're getting really close to the end. Talk to me, man. Two Cops, One Donut.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So, I also have a podcast,
Yeah.
and I have a very Joe Rogan-esque approach to things where I think it isn't you versus me, it's us trying to help the world, just like as police officers. So I created my podcast in 2021, Two Cops, One Donut. And the idea behind the name, for those wondering, no, it's not Two Girls, One Cup. It was inspired by Two Bears, One Cave, which is Bert Kreischer and Tom Segura, another podcast of comedians
Wow.
that I like. They're two big burly men that, they look like bears, and they're in their man cave doing their podcast. So that is what inspired it. So for me, you're like, well, who's the other cop? It is me. I am two cops. I'm a military cop because I'm still in,
Mm-hmm.
and I am a municipal cop. So there's your two cops and the one donut, which
Oh,
I
that's awesome.
will proudly enjoy any chance I can. Um, and the premise behind what I do is bridging the gap with the community through
Yes.
education, humanizing, perspective, and humor. I do that in a bunch of different ways. I do personal interviews. I have guys like you on. And if you're wondering, is that a podcast I really want to check out? I'm not saying you have to, but here's the premise. If I were to have the Internal Affairs podcast on there, have Marlon on my show, we're going to talk about his specialty. How many of you guys have ever sat down and had a long form discussion with an IA guy? You haven't.
No.
And so if I were to have him on first, I want to know why he got into police work. What did you do to get into it? Well, that's the humanized portion.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's how we start to bridge that gap. If we stay disconnected and we treat each other like robots, like we tend to do on the internet,
Yeah.
if I have a guy like Marlon on, I want you to either one, believe what he says, or two, say, no, that guy's full of shit. And why? Well, he humanized himself up to that point, and then he also qualified himself.
Yeah.
So, because I'm going to lead up to that. Okay, what qualifies you as an IA expert? Well,
Yeah.
I've done it for 20 something years, and this is what I teach nationally, and I do all of this stuff, and I have my own podcast, and I do that,
Mm-hmm.
this and the other, and so, and then we get into perspective sharing, and
Yeah, that's
that's
right.
where we go down those stories. So that is the first facet of the Two Cops, One Donut. The other thing where Marlon got to participate is my live shows. I like people to get in the brains of how cops think in the moment. We can
Yeah.
Monday morning quarterback all day. donut operator. There's other podcasts and guys out there that they break down a body cam footage
Yep.
after the fact,
Yes.
which is great. And it's a good way to educate people.
Mm-hmm.
What you don't get, and this is where I think we're unique, is what an officer's thinking as the call's developing.
Yeah.
So we will pause it, and it's very interactive for my audience. So because it's live and you got to see that people get to ask questions. They get to say, well, why don't you do this? Or what about this? Or they get, they're funny. A lot of the people that are on there are funny. And it's just this cool way to bridge that gap. Again, it's just another form of bridging the gap. We're communicating together. You're understanding you're understanding me, and we can ask those questions. Some people have a really good perspective outside of law enforcement that helps other cops like get out of their fishbowl and realize their own personal police bias and see, oh, that's the view from a citizen. And that makes sense. So that's the other facet. And then the third facet is I share a lot of reels and shorts and do these, I try to be funny. It's, you can't bat 1,000 all the time, guys. So some of them are funny, some are not. But I'll mix in education, and then I'll also mix in discussion. You're gonna be like, oh, he's doing this for the clicks and the likes. No, it's to facilitate conversation, and then we talk back and forth when we don't get the trolls in there. And we have, we're able to share different perspectives on things. So that is Two Cops One Doughnut. That is what we do. You can find us at twocopsonedonut.com. Find us on YouTube. You can find us all over the place. And we spell it two different ways. If you just want to listen to us on audio, like Spotify and Apple and stuff like that, it's the number 2 cops, the number 1 in donut. And then if you're looking for us on any social media, just type in, like you see in the background with me right now, the word 2 cops, the word 1 in donut. So 2 cops, 1 donut. But yeah, brother, that's basically how I got this thing going, man.
You know what? I got to tell you, bro, you are batting 1,000. From my perspective and my lens, I truly 100% appreciate you. When I first saw what you're doing, I can tell you from a guy from LA, and I can speak for probably the majority of LAPD. You know what? You are. It's worth every second, every minute to watch
Thanks,
what
man.
you're doing, man. You're doing something so good, positive, funny, enthusiastic, and we don't get that a lot. And so keep at it. We're very proud of you and out here. I'll leave the floor up to you, man. We're at the end. Any advice you have for all these young bucks trying to come on the job? I mean, what would you tell them, man?
If you are just starting in law enforcement, one, take grappling seriously. I'm a big proponent of BJJ.
Yeah.
Although I will admit it is not the end all be all. It's not the only thing out there. Catch wrestling, judo, Muay Thai, some of these other things that just make sure it's reputable. But if you want to be the officer that gets in the least amount of use of force, know how to use the most amount of use of force. Where you will tend to start using and getting out of control is when you've hit your limit really quick. And you're only going to understand what I'm saying once you've been in it. So please, if you were to put anything above any training, it's grappling, in my opinion. Please take that serious, get that, and you will find that you rarely have to use force because you know how to use force. Yeah. And then the other thing is learn how to write, because y'all rookies reports suck these days. And that's just how it is. And get out there and talk to as many people as often as you can. Just have regular conversation. Those are the 3 biggest pieces of advice I can get.
My dude, my guy, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. We're going to wrap it up. And like always, please be safe out there. And don't forget to go Code 6. Thank you.